Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. And today we're going somewhere uh, pretty interesting, I think. Buckle up, because we're diving into Japanese folklore to uncover the mysteries of the Jorōgumo. It's a creature, let me tell you, as alluring as it is terrifying.
Definitely a creature that's captivated people for centuries.
Yeah, and to get to the bottom of it, we've got some awesome source material lined up. We've got excerpts from online articles and even a clip from the PBS series Monstrum.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating deep dive with all these sources. Should give us a really good picture of this legendary creature.
Yeah, for sure. So to set the stage for anyone who might not be familiar, the Jorōgumo is classified as a yokai, which is like a blanket term in Japanese folklore.
Yeah, think of yokai as like supernatural beings, spirits,
Right,
demons.
often with these, kind of animalistic features.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally. And for the Jorōgumo, the animal we're talking about is, of course, the spider.
Ah, yes, this
And
one.
typically it's depicted as a golden orb weaver, but this is no ordinary spider.
Oh, I figured as much. What makes it so special?
Legend has it that after living a long, long life, like 400 years, it goes through this crazy transformation.
Okay, so what, it like levels up or something? What happens?
Well, yeah, kind of. Not only does it get supernatural powers, which we'll get into, but it also can shapeshift into the form of a beautiful woman.
Okay, so not your average spider then. A beautiful woman, huh?
Huh.
That's an interesting twist, but something tells me there's got to be a catch.
Yeah, you could say that. The Jorōgumo's powers are definitely something you don't want to mess with.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What kind of powers are we talking about here?
Well, first of all, picture this. Silken webs, but not just any webs. Webs so strong they can bind humans. And then there's the venom, right? Super potent, capable of weakening victims over time. Oh, and on top of that, it can command other spiders. Some are even said to breathe fire.
Wait, hold on. Fire-breathing spiders. Okay, now that's just taking things to a whole other level.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And as if that wasn't enough, it also likes to make its home in these super secluded spots like, dark caves, deep forests, abandoned houses, those sorts of places. And actually, some sources even say they can blend into human society, like, hide in plain sight in cities and towns.
Okay, so not just sticking to the wilderness then. That's even creepier. They could be anywhere.
Right. It adds a whole other layer to the mythos, doesn't it?
It does. So back to the beautiful woman thing. Where does that fit into all of this? What's the point of that transformation?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. See, the Jorgamo uses its beauty, which is basically just a facade, right, for this monstrous spider form, to lure unsuspecting prey.
We knew it. It's all a trap.
Yeah.
So it's not just about catching food then, right? There's got to be more to it than that.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely about more than just survival. There's this element of, like, cunning and deception.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm starting to see why this creature has freaked people out for so long. It's like this clash of beauty and horror, seduction and death.
Exactly, and that duality plays out in a lot of the traditional stories about the Jorōgumo.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me an example.
All right, so there's this one story about a guy just chilling by a waterfall, when suddenly he almost gets caught in this hidden spider web. He manages to escape, thank goodness, but he realizes it was a Jorōgumo trying to trap him. So he races back to his village and warns everyone about the danger lurking in the shadows.
Wow, that's intense. So it's not just a terrifying monster. It's also kind of a cautionary figure, like a warning against, I don't know, maybe being too trusting or something.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be fooled by appearances.
Right, exactly. So any other stories like that?
Oh, absolutely. There's another story. This one's about a woodcutter. He accidentally drops his axe into a pool of water, and this beautiful woman appears. She's like, "Hey, I can get your axe back for you, but you got to promise not to tell anyone about me." Classic fairy tale stuff.
Okay, but this is a Jorōgumo story, so I'm guessing he spills the beans, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course he does. He can't resist telling his wife about the whole encounter. And as you can imagine, bad things happen. I think he ends up getting sick and dying in most versions of the story.
Yikes. So there are some serious consequences for revealing the Jorōgumo's true nature, huh?
It seems so. Like, she really prefers to operate in secrecy, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I get it. Mystery adds to the fear factor.
It does. But it also makes you wonder, like, why even bother helping the woodcutter in the first place?
Yeah, right. What's in it for her? It's not like she's known for being, helpful.
Maybe it was a test, Or maybe she knew he wouldn't be able to keep his mouth shut, like she was setting him up from the beginning.
Oh, that's even creepier, like she's playing with her victims.
Right. It really adds to the whole manipulation aspect of her character.
It's amazing how these stories, even though they're super old, still manage to like tap into something that we find fascinating even today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Jorgumo is everywhere these days. Video games, anime, even tattoo art. Like it's popped up in Neo, Gravity Falls, Love, Death, plus robots, and a bunch of other places.
That's crazy. I mean, it's not just confined to ancient stories anymore. It's become this like pop culture icon almost.
Yeah, it really has. And it makes you wonder, like, how do these modern interpretations differ from the traditional ones?
Hmm.
What does it tell us about how people view the Jorogumo today?
That's a really cool way to think about it. Like maybe the way we choose to represent these creatures in our media says something about us, about our own anxieties and fears.
Right, precisely. It really
Yeah.
speaks to the power of these old stories, how they can still resonate with us centuries later.
It's incredible. So speaking of ancient wisdom, what do these old stories tell us about how to deal with a Joroguma? Like, if you were unlucky enough to come face to face with one, is there any way to escape its clutches?
Well, folklore actually does offer a few suggestions.
Okay, let's hear them. I'm all for survival tips when it comes to monstrous spider demons.
Well, one method, and this might sound a bit cheesy, is true love.
True love, really.
Yeah, it's said that if you truly love someone with all your heart, you're immune to the Jurgumo's charms. Kind of a fairy tale solution, but hey, who knows?
Okay, that's cute and all, but let's be real. What are some, like, more practical methods?
All right, well, there are a few options, though they're definitely more direct, shall we say. Like, for instance, diatomite, which is this fossilized algae powder, is said to dehydrate the Juragumo. And then there's fire, of course, your classic monster weakness. And some even say a well-placed sword thrust to the thorax or abdomen will do the trick.
Oh, wow. Okay, those are definitely a bit more on the brutal side. But I guess when you're dealing with a creature like this, you got to do what you got to do.
Right. But if you're looking for a more preventative measure, legend has it that the Juragumo hates the smell of mint leaf oil mixed with lemon and water. So maybe, carry a little travel-sized bottle with you just in case.
Okay, good tip. I'll keep that in mind. But seriously, though, all these methods for defeating a Jodogomo, it makes you wonder, do they have, like, a deeper meaning? Could they be, like, reflecting certain cultural beliefs or fears about spiders in Japanese society?
That's a really insightful point. I mean, it's certainly possible that these methods, which have been passed down through generations, offer a glimpse into how people historically perceived and dealt with the threat of spiders, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like these stories are more than just stories. They're like a window into the past.
Exactly.
So I guess the big question is, what are we to make of the Jodogomo? Is it just a terrifying monster,
Yeah.
a cautionary tale, or something more complex?
I think it could be all of those things. It's a creature that embodies our fears, our desires, and our fascination with the unknown. It forces us to confront those darker aspects of ourselves.
I like that. It makes you think. And it sounds like there's a lot more to uncover about this creature than meets the eye.
Oh, for sure. We've only just scratched the surface. And luckily for us, we've got a whole bunch more sources to dive into.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see what else we can learn about this captivating yet terrifying creature from Japanese folklore. But first, a quick break.
It's amazing how the Jurgumo just taps into these primal fears, right? Like it's a spider and, those webs and all. And then there's this whole deceptive beauty element going on at the same time. What a combo.
It really is a wild mix. And what's even more interesting is that even with this fearsome reputation, she's not always just like pure evil.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. I've noticed that too. Some stories actually hint at a more complex character. Like there's this sense of, I don't know, maybe a sadness or a longing in her actions.
Totally. It's like maybe she actually does want companionship, but she's kind of trapped by her nature. It's kind of tragic when you think about it.
Yeah, it adds a whole other dimension, doesn't it? It makes you wonder if there's something else going on beneath the surface. Something more than just monster.
Right, like a glimmer of something human. Well, speaking of monsters, that PBS Monstrum episode we have actually dives into some real-world inspirations for the Jorgumo. Do you remember what he said about that?
Oh, yeah, they brought up the Joro spider. It's a pretty big orb weaver native to East Asia with these really striking yellow and black markings. You've probably seen pictures, right?
Yeah, I think I have. It's definitely easy to see how a spider like that could inspire these legends, especially when you see those, like, intricate webs they build.
Exactly. And the webs are such a huge part of the whole Jorgumo imagery, right? Like, Monstrom actually pointed out that spider webs have always been associated with this idea of entrapment, both literally and metaphorically. Like, that feeling of being caught, stuck, can't get out. That's a pretty primal fear.
Totally. And then you combine that with the whole beautiful woman thing, and yeah, you've got a pretty potent image. Like, she's alluring and deadly all at once.
It's a powerful combination. And the episode also mentions that spiders have often been seen as feminine creatures in Japanese culture, partly because of their association with weaving. It was traditionally women's work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And those webs really are incredible. They're like works of art.
Right. So they saw spiders as having this creative power, but at the same time, there's this inherent danger too. So you've got that same duality we talked about earlier with the Jorgumo creation and destruction, beauty and danger.
It's a recurring theme. So I know Mostrom also talked about some older Jogomo stories, right? What kind of insights did those offer?
Oh, they had this one story about a man who encounters a beautiful woman playing a biwa that's like a Japanese lute, right, by the river.
Oh, classic Jorgumo setup. I've heard variations of that one.
Exactly. But in this version, the guy is actually suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And he manages to get away. So it's more of a cautionary tale, kind of emphasizing that the Jogomo's beauty is really a weapon.
Good advice. Don't be fooled by appearances.
Exactly. And then there was another one, the woodcutter story again. Remember, he drops his axe into the water.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The one with the beautiful woman and the promise.
Right, that one. And you know how it goes. He doesn't keep his promise. He tells his wife, and as a result, he gets sick and dies. So again, it emphasizes the importance of keeping promises when you're dealing with the supernatural, right?
Especially when it comes to the Jorigumo.
Right. But it also makes you think, why help him at all if she's just going to punish him later?
It's a good point. What's the motivation there?
Maybe it was a setup all along. Like, she knew he wouldn't be able to resist telling someone.
It's almost like a test she puts people through.
It's like she enjoys the manipulation. It's not just about being a predator, it's about being in control.
It adds this layer of strategy to her character, that makes her even more formidable. And actually, that brings up something we haven't talked about yet, habitat. We mentioned that they can be found in rural areas, but also in urban settings. What do you think that says about the Jorigumo?
It's pretty significant, right? I mean, the fact that it can exist in both natural and human-made environments suggests it's adaptable. It's not just limited to one kind of space.
And that makes it harder to pin down, harder to define.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's almost like it represents the anxieties of both worlds, the natural world and the human world. Out in the wilderness, it's this primal predator, but then in the city, it's this hidden danger lurking in the shadows.
That's such a cool way to think about it. So it's not just a creature of the wild, it's also a creature of the city, a creature of our anxieties, basically.
Exactly. And that speaks to how the Joagumo can be interpreted on so many different levels, right? Like, it can be a symbol of nature's dangers, but also, like you said, a reflection of the anxieties we face in our own lives.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, do the stories say anything about what happens to the Jorigumo when she enters a city? Does she adapt her tactics? Does she change her behavior?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure our sources today give us a definitive answer, but it's definitely something to think about, right? Like, does the urban environment change the Jogumo, or does she bring her wild ways into the city?
Right. Does she blend in or stand out? Maybe that's something for our listeners to consider. Is the Jorigumo more dangerous in a place where she can disappear into nature? Or is she more terrifying in the city where she's hidden in plain sight?
Such a cool question. And it just shows how folklore can really get us thinking critically about these stories, about the creatures we create.
It's amazing how these stories spark our imagination. It makes me think, for all her terrifying aspects, there's also this strange allure to the Jorigumo, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's this mystique about her. She's beautiful, dangerous, and mysterious all at the same time. It makes her such a compelling character, even if she is scary.
Okay, so we've talked about the Jorigumo's powers, her habitat, and how she shows up in folklore and pop culture. But there's one thing we haven't really touched on yet. The way she actually captures and kills her victims. Like, how does it all go down?
Yeah, that's a pretty important part of her story. And from what the sources say, it's not a quick death. Like, it's described as this slow and agonizing process. Her venom weakens the victim over time. There's this element of cruelty to it. It's more than just needing to feed.
It's almost like she enjoys making them suffer. That's pretty messed up.
It is pretty disturbing. And some sources even suggest she might keep victims alive, saving them for later meals.
Oh, God, that's just awful. But do you think there's more to it than just like sadism? Could it serve another purpose? Like maybe it's a way to keep the victim from escaping or fighting back.
That's a really interesting thought. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Maybe the venom, in addition to being a weapon, is also kind of like a paralyzing agent.
It makes sense, right? If you're a predator, you don't want your prey running off or putting up a fight.
Especially a predator like the Jorōgumo, who relies on deception and tricking her victims.
So the venom could be like a key part of her strategy. Makes her victims totally helpless.
Exactly. And it also reminds us that, folklore can reflect real-world dangers, like real spiders use venom to subdue their prey, and the Jorōgumo uses hers for survival, too.
It's like a dark reflection of nature. So is there anything in the stories about how victims might escape, once they're caught?
Well, remember we talked about true love earlier?
Oh, right. The fairy tale solution?
Yeah, that one. But beyond that, the sources are a bit vague. Some mention courage and cunning, like maybe if you're quick-witted, you might be able to outsmart the Jorōgumo.
So it's not just about strength, but also like mental agility, right? Maybe it's saying that even in the face of danger, you still have choices.
Yeah, I like that. It's a powerful message. Even when you're up against something that seems impossible, there's still hope.
So what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from all this about the way she captures and kills her prey?
I think it highlights how important it is to be aware. Pay attention to your surroundings and remember that danger can lurk beneath the surface. The Jorōgumo is all about deception, tricking people into feeling safe before she strikes. So it's a reminder, things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Be cautious, be alert.
Exactly.
It makes me think about like how we might encounter our own Jorōgumo in our lives, Maybe not literal spider demons, but those situations or people who present a false image, who are trying to lure us into something dangerous.
Ooh, that's a great connection. Like, even though she's a mythical creature, she can still teach us something about navigating the real world.
Yeah, be discerning, trust your gut, don't fall for things that seem too good to be true.
Exactly. And it shows how powerful stories can be, right? Even ancient myths can still be relevant to our lives today.
I love that. Folklore isn't just entertainment. It's a way of passing down knowledge and wisdom.
Absolutely. And with the Jorōgumo, it's like a warning. Be careful, be aware, and don't underestimate the power of deception.
It definitely seems like we've uncovered a lot about the darker side of the Juruno, but is there anything in the sources that might offer a different perspective? Something a little less grim.
Actually, there is. One of the articles mentions that in some interpretations, the Jorōgumo isn't totally malicious. Like, there are stories where she shows compassion or helps people in need.
Really? That's surprising. What kind of stories are those?
Well, there's this one story about a Jorōgumo who falls in love with a human man. She tries to resist her predatory instincts, but her true nature makes it impossible for them to be together.
Oh, wow. That's kind of heartbreaking. It's like a tragic love story, but with a supernatural twist.
Yeah, exactly. And it suggests that even a creature like the Jorōgumo can experience love and longing.
It's like she's not entirely a monster.
Right, and it makes you think about the whole question of good and evil. Is she inherently bad, or is she just a product of her nature?
That's a deep question.
It is, and I don't think there's an easy answer. Maybe it's both. Maybe she's capable of both kindness and cruelty, and ultimately it's her choices that define her.
It definitely adds another layer to her character, makes her even more fascinating, I think.
Definitely. And it reminds us that things aren't always black and white. Even in folklore, there's always that gray area.
The Giorgimo is full of surprises. It sounds like we've still got a lot to learn about her, and I'm excited to see what else we can discover in the sources we have left.
It really is amazing how much this creature has resonated through the ages. It's like the Jorōgumo is this walking embodiment of don't judge a book by its cover. That whole idea that beautiful things can be dangerous.
Oh, totally. Classic trope. But the Giorgimo just takes it to a whole other level. I mean, she's got the beauty, the power, the mystery. She's alluring, terrifying, all wrapped up in one. Yeah, definitely. And speaking of allure, one thing that's always stood out to me is how she uses music to lure in victims. We've mentioned the biwa a couple times now, that Japanese lute. Can you tell us a little more about the role of music in all of this?
Oh, for sure. Music's super important in Japanese folklore, often tied to the supernatural.
Hmm.
And with the Jorōgumo, it's described as this incredibly beautiful, mesmerizing music, but also kind of unsettling at the same time.
So it's not just pretty sounds, right?
Yeah.
There's something more to it.
Right. It's like it has this hypnotic quality, it can entrance listeners and draw them in, even when they know better.
Oh, that's creepy. It's like she's weaving this, like, sonic web along with her silk traps.
Exactly. I love that image. And it really adds to the whole sense of danger around her, doesn't it?
Totally. It's not just about what you see, it's about what you hear, too, you know?
It really speaks to the power of music, right? We all know how music can make us feel things, but the Jorōgumo legend, it takes that to the extreme. It suggests that music can be a weapon.
That's intense. Like a tool for control and manipulation.
Right, like it's almost like those stories of sirens in Greek mythology. They lure sailors to their deaths with their beautiful singing.
Oh, yeah. It's that same theme, that beauty. Whether you see it or hear it, can be super dangerous.
Exactly. It shows how universal those themes are. Whether it's the Jorōgumo or the sirens, they both represent the dangerous side of beauty, right? We
Right. Yeah.
can be seduced by what we see and hear, even if it leads to bad things.
Yeah, it's like a reminder to always be a little skeptical, you know? Look deeper, question things, especially if it seems too good to be true.
Absolutely. And it's also about being self-aware, right? Knowing what makes you tick, what your weaknesses are. The Jorōgumo, she preys on people who are looking for love, for connection, even just beauty and escape. And those desires are normal, but they can also make us vulnerable.
We got to be careful, basically.
Yeah, be aware. It's not about ignoring your desires, but about approaching them with a sense of balance.
So, thinking about all of this, what do you think the Jorōgumo can teach us? Not just about deception and beauty, but about ourselves.
I think it all comes back to self-awareness. If we know ourselves, our desires, our vulnerabilities, we can be more cautious, less likely to be manipulated.
Love that. It's like
Mm.
she's a mythical creature, but she can offer real-world wisdom.
For sure. And even though she's scary, the Jorōgumo can be this guide. She's like, hey, be careful out there. Things aren't always what they seem. Beauty can be a trap.
Well said. I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of the Jorōgumo. It's been a fascinating and slightly terrifying journey.
It has. But remember, the world of Japanese folklore is huge. Tons of captivating stories and creatures out there.
Exactly. There's always more to learn, more to explore. Thanks for joining us.